Hey everybody, welcome to the Ironworks podcast. I'm Pastor Tyler.
And I'm Zach.
And we are very glad to have you back with us today. We're going to be continuing our study through the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to finish chapter 6, and I would expect we'll take a short break and maybe talk about some other stuff before we resume with chapter 7. But continuing through the teachings of Jesus today, talking about worry, about not letting tomorrow's worries get a hold of today and ruin what's going on. Before we get into that, I want to remind everybody about Ironworks.media. We are building the premier Christian resource network for the church, and we are using Ironworks podcast as one of the main vehicles to do that. Zach, we're getting a lot of good feedback on the podcast lately. It's been pretty great to hear all the comments and all the emails that we get, and you know, with the other Difference Makers podcasts and everything, but it's kind of all coming together.
Yeah, good feedback on the podcast. I think that we're getting opportunities to kind of do some new stuff that we've been really excited about, from, you know, just getting the book out there, and you just did a radio spot.
Yes, I just did a radio interview today with WDJC here in Birmingham, and that's going to be posted on our YouTube channel as soon as they've aired it. They'll be sending us those files, so you can keep a lookout for that. Nothing new to those of you that listen to the podcast and heard us talk about it or went to the conference, or if you've read the book, but it's just kind of cool to see it talked about in public. So yeah, lots of opportunities
super fun.
coming up.
I've actually been doing a little, you know, some of you who are listening to this know who you are. I've been calling some of the young guys who like our stuff and just asking them, hey, what's going on? What are we doing? What are we doing right? What can we work on? And, you know, all of this, and we've talked about this a lot with things at the church as well. All of what we've been doing for the last few years, I think in a lot of ways the Lord is showing us is kind of the getting us ready for what the Lord wants us to be doing coming up here. And that's super exciting to just start to see, I don't know what you'd call it, almost like everything kind of reaching this stage 2 point where, okay, now we've got that groundwork laid in, and and people are excited about it. People are looking forward to it. Let's see what the Lord wants to do with it, you know, from here.
Kind of like we talked about last night, where Elijah felt like his life was over, and yet everything that happened was just the preface to when he was going to go and anoint kings and get Elisha with him. So yeah, things are going really great. We're excited for what's happening at Ironworks.media. Please go there. You can sign up for our mailing list today for free and get 2 ebooks that you can download right away. And we're going to have some new things coming up pretty soon. You want to be knowing about what's coming up here on the podcasts and what's coming up with book releases. And we're going to be getting the audio book out for the Desolation of Israel as soon as we can. Been working on that. It's a long process. I've tried to manage everybody's expectations. It's a long process, and this is by far the longest book that I've had to do an audio. But it's probably going to end up being something like 10 or 12 hours in recording time. So imagine, you know, it's going to be at least that long, probably more like 1.5 that, plus going back and editing. So it'll be a process, but it's going on, and I'm very excited to see what the Lord is going to do with that and continue to do through Ironworks.media. Zach, what have you been reading lately? I'm going somewhere with this, but we'll start with you. What have you been reading lately?
Both of us have been reading the same book. Actually, well, I've been reading multiple books. Do you read multiple books at once?
Always. I read like 8 at a time.
That's kind of how I am. So I've been reading a bunch of different stuff lately. One of the books that we both ended up starting at the same time, I saw that you had that book about Assyria on your shelf, and I had some Audible credits. So I went and got the book right before we drove up to Virginia for my little brother's wedding, and I popped it in and started just cranking through it on the way up to Virginia, on the way back. We have had some pretty fun discussions about that book on Assyria, mostly because...
it's called Assyria by Eckhart Fromm. Just nice and easy. The title is Assyria, like the empire in the Bible.
And some of it has been super interesting. I've just been learning a lot. The reason I wanted to get it is because I would say that my knowledge sometimes on Old Testament stuff is not as good as I would like it to be, like in terms of like the history and the background and things. So I, you know, wanted, as we're getting closer to some of this stuff, or, you know, it would be cool as we're studying Isaiah or whatever, to just know, okay, this is what's going on with the Assyrians as the background. And so all that stuff, just the non-biblical background stuff, has been fascinating. Very cool. The Assyrians were crazy people, all the stuff you'd imagine. However, we had this, you know, I would call it a conversation, Tyler, but I think it was more of a shout dialogue between the two of us in the office. Anytime this guy touched anything that also is recorded in Scripture, it was just... it has been so far.
All of a sudden, it's who knows.
It's incredibly frustrating. Incredibly frustrating. And it's all the classic things, right, of just every other source takes precedence over Scripture. Scripture's not a primary source. Imagining that you can see with like magical X-ray scholar goggles the process of how you believe the Bible was constructed from 17 sources. And wouldn't you know it, the legendary mythical sources are the ones that ever claim anything supernatural ever in the Bible. Those are the ones that we know that was from a whole different thing. It's amazing how they can spot it.
They often dismiss and even though the Bible's history has been every time we've been able to dig up
of course.
something biblical, it turns out that the Bible was accurate and all that. And really, I mean, you can hardly blame these guys, because what they do is they go to the religion department and they find out, what did we believe about the Old Testament? And they say, well, the Old Testament was, written over, well after all the events were over, with suspicious authors and suspicious motives, and we can deconstruct it, and so it's kind of all working in tandem. But yeah, the history of it has been really good. Although he has these weird little obeisances to his politics in there, where he's like, there's a drought that came to Assyria, which caused many of the people to flee the area, much like the recent refugee crisis in Europe has been caused by climate change. And I was like, what? What?
It just kind of let that blink a little bit, yeah.
But what do you think of it? Because I've found it actually to be kind of dry, to be honest with you. He's not really giving much of a narrative history, as much as like, here was this king and then here was this guy. And I just got to the part about the empire. The best bits are been when he's summarizing like a piece of Assyrian poetry, like Assyrian epics that they've uncovered. Those are cool, but I mean, their names are all like unpronounceable, and they all just kind of run together. And he's not really pulling me through, although I'm going to keep reading it.
It hasn't been like
it's for the Bible.
Insanely exciting if we're talking about it for its style points. I think from like the content I've been learning, even if, and if you're going to read any kind of secular history of anything overlapping the Bible, all jokes aside, you got to learn to kind of just accept that.
Yeah, not even that. I'm just talking about he's
it's
boring.
All right. I mean, yeah, it is a little boring. I did like anytime he's talking about, well, actually, what's been really cool is I didn't know or understand all of the like interplay between, okay, the Assyrians had their own set of gods, but then the Babylonians had their own set of gods. And later on in the book, he explains how the Assyrians sometimes would sort of like adopt or almost like take over or appropriate all the Babylonian gods, and other times they would decide, no, our gods are better than your gods. And it was all this like back and forth, almost like fads at court, depending on who the king at the time was into. Was he a Babylonian like cultural guy? Was he a Babylonian cultural appreciator? Then all of a sudden the Babylonian gods would be, their stock would go up basically in Assyria. So that was all stuff I didn't know about. And talking about Gilgamesh and all that stuff, that's always interesting.
It corroborated a lot of things the Bible talks about too, or that you see in the scripture. He talks about the invasion of the sea peoples, which was the Philistines, and how that just completely upended the whole the whole area and allowed the Israelites to take possession of the land. Like, he acknowledges that there was, at least to his credit, that there was a nation called Israel, and that they did, he takes the late date of Exodus. We would take the early date.
Also, I think
that's a minor disagreement.
I thought the primary sources are always fun. Anytime
you're reading something Assyrian, that's always cool.
He's got some letters right in the beginning where he's got like a young guy who's like a student, or he's living somewhere separate from his parents, and he's basically writing
all my friends have better clothes.
Literally,
it's
like
hilarious.
He's basically writing like a college kid's email home, but from thousands of years ago. He's like, you guys haven't provided me with any sets of clothes. All of my friends have at least 3 sets of clothes.
Funny, dude.
And my one set of clothes is wearing out. So and so, and he actually says at one point, he's like, so and so's mother loves him, and he's adopted, and you actually had me, and you don't love me at all.
My gosh.
And it's so good.
And there's the one where the wife writes to her husband because he had like taken all the money with him, and she's like, so I expect you to I'm assuming that your plan will be to repay this when you get back, because I've had to borrow on the set. It's like, really, in case you ever thought that ancient people were somehow like a different species than us. Like,
it's just the same.
The other thing that I thought was interesting in there, and this is a topic for another day, but he talked about Semiramis. And Semiramis, this is an important thing that we'll talk about another time. But this was a queen regent of Assyria when her son was a minor, and she was basically helping rule the kingdom. Her name was Shemu Ramat, I believe it was. And she became sort of a folk hero of that area of Babylon and Assyria. And there became legends that sprung up around the Greeks, like the Herodotus and stuff, report at this, I think, about Semiramis, the famous queen of Babylon, who was not, in fact, a Babylonian queen. She was actually an Assyrian queen. But the reason it matters is because there is a spurious book that was written in the 1800s about all the how like every religion is secretly Babylonian religion, and it talks about how what's his name? Nimrod and his wife Semiramis had the first cult at the Tower of Babel. There is zero historical proof for that, and it's led to a lot of misinterpretation of Bible prophecy too, actually.
Wait, you're telling me there's a spurious book from the 1800s?
Yeah, who knew, right?
Shocking.
Back when you could just, no one could check you, like they had to take your word for it. Yeah, I'm an expert on Babylon, But I mean, it's unfortunately been, you read it in like very guys that you like Pastor Chuck or David Jeremiah or some of these guys that, reference these things because it's quoted in all these commentaries, yet it all goes back to this guy that took these legends that were, not even close to the timeline that he's talking about. Right. And you read the Bible and none of it's in there. And it's like, this unlocking the secrets of the ancient, so this was a real world source on, so that's where all that, that comes from. She was a real queen of Assyria way after the time of Nimrod for sure. And if you ever hear somebody kind of talk about, Nimrod was the first, pagan worshiper, and he was like the pope of the world, and she was the queen of heaven, and you're like, where is that in your Bible? It's not in your Bible. It's a dude from the 1800s that basically made it all up. So maybe we'll talk about that more another day, because I have found that is a third rail with some people, dude. You do not touch that, because that is like sacred for some people.
I had no idea
sure
about all that.
Yeah, you've probably heard it mentioned before.
Huh.
Like people just kind of say things in passing. But I've pushed back on no, that's legit. I'm like, it is not. But I'm not going to fight with you over lunch. But it's my podcast, so we're going to talk. About it.
This is not lunch. This is podcast.
But in any case, the book on Assyria, it's been all right. But there's another one that I've been reading that I want to discuss, and not really so much it, but what it reminded me of. And this kind of ties in for what we're trying to do here with Ironworks Media and pastor-driven resources for the church. There's a book that I read, and it's called, Zach, do you know what a Festschrift is?
I also am a nerd, so I do know what a Festschrift is.
There you go. So tell us what a Festschrift is, and try to say Festschrift as many times as you can.
It's a German thing, right? Where it's a collection of essays for somebody, right? It's like in honor of somebody. We all got put together some essays. I think one time
you publish a book in somebody's honor.
Yeah,
basically.
I think C.S. Lewis did one for Charles Williams when he died. They
Yes.
put each of them kind of wrote like an essay or a piece kind of, and they're not all about the guy, right? It's just like we all did some essays.
It's an academic thing. Here's a body of research, usually surrounding themes that are near and dear to that guy's heart, or building on his research or something like that. So I read a Festschrift. That's what I'm trying to say. And it was good. It was good articles. Some of them are better than others. Anytime you get 16 guys writing an article, you're not going to dig them all. But there was one at the end, which was an interaction with womanist thought. And this was published, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 2012, 13, 14.
Wait, hang on. I can't let you get away with that.
I'm not. I'm going to come back to it.
Womanist?
Not feminist,
checking.
womanist. And
thank you.
I learned that is distinct from feminist thought, because feminists say, I can't even describe it without saying. Look, what it was a very early example of what we now call wokeness in evangelical literary culture, academic culture. And womanism, according to this article, so don't come at me, I'm just telling you what the article said. Womanism is different from feminism, because feminism is only focused on the general struggle of women against men. Womanism is all about the specific struggle of black women against everybody else. It's totally intersectional. All that, women are oppressed, black women are oppressed more, homosexual black women are oppressed even more, disabled homosexual black women, and on it goes. It's that kind of thing. And what the article was advocating for was it would be good for the evangelical church to learn from womanist thought and other deconstructionist movements, because they help us to see our blind spots and so on. So I don't know anything about the author. I don't even remember his name. So who knows where he stands on this now. But as I was reading it, I was kind of chuckling to myself, because number one, I'm reminded of how innocuous it sounds when you say it detached from all of its context. Like, all we want to do is we want to make sure that we're remembering that there are other people with different perspectives. Like, who would oppose that, right? But this whole thing was, all we're doing is trying to learn from others, and maybe we see our own blind spots and stuff. But now you sit back and but we know what this stuff is. We know that it's a power grab. We know that it's a political thing. We know that it's tied to all sorts of postmodern ideologies, and it's very anti-Christ is what it has been. It's very pro-homosexual and all this stuff. Like, there's been that whole movement has blown through, and we've seen what it is, and it's on its way out. And it just was kind of making me laugh, because I'm like, anybody who reads this now, whoever this author is, you are going to be immediately discounted from the conversation, because you are pushing this stuff and you weren't able to see what it was. And even I, as I was reading it, was able to go, okay, but they're talking about how we have to deconstruct culture, and the Bible is very specific that we're not supposed to do that. And he uses a couple like cherry-picked verses to jump off, and this is why we can engage in politics as Christians. And then he had this whole deal about, even if they come to different theological conclusions, we have to recognize that they're coming from a place of pain and hurt. And it's like, well, if they deny the gospel, it doesn't matter. Like, they had a whole thing there about denying Savior narratives, and about how black churches need to be centered more in America. And I was thinking to myself, like, well, we're not supposed to have black churches anymore. We're supposed to have white churches or Jewish churches or Indian churches. We're supposed to just have one. We're supposed to tear down the wall. So some very easy things to point out, but it's also sophisticated. And some of y'all might remember in like 2020 when this was really picking up steam, how hard it really is slippery to get your hands around. Zach, I mean, maybe you, before I make my application point here, you remember when that stuff was kind of creeping in? You were in school around the same time as I was, and kind of these sort of weird pseudo-feminist things, or kind of critical theory would make its way in, even in places that it shouldn't be. Did you ever experience any of that when you were in school?
I think most people.
You worked in the social work department, so I'm sure you saw your share of stuff there.
My client declines to answer, but
you under an NDA or something?
No, not at all. It was a little weird. Actually, the weirdest stuff to me all jokes aside with the social work thing, when you work in a department like that at a school, at an academic institution, even though it's Christian, you're going to expect to see some weird stuff. You're going to expect to hear things where you're like, I don't agree with that.
It's not church.
Yeah, you're right.
It's not the Costa Mesa conference.
And you expect to see some funky things. The thing that was interesting to me back then, and I'll ask you guys to kind of cast your minds back, maybe even before, I'd say before 2020, in like 2015, 2016, those times. What used to surprise me, and Tyler, I remember we had these conversations, is it was the places you would hear it that you weren't expecting it. And the places where you'd say, I don't think that guy or that gal actually knows what they're talking about
sure.
there.
I had a lot of that.
I'm not sure
Pastor friends of mine, I'm like, dude, you don't know what that means.
They don't. It's like watching your buddy juggle a hand grenade where you're like, I'm not sure you're aware that this is about to go off. And what was happening was really awesome, and it was separated several degrees from the source of the problem, right? Most of us weren't interacting with these crazy, Marxist, academics who were making all their money just like being wild about this stuff. We were interacting with somebody's grandpa who read, a centrist news article that told them that it's nice to be nice to people, and by not knowing where this stuff
or even
from,
nice sounding words that sounded good, like anti-racist,
right, exactly.
I'm sure. Yeah, of course. I'm for that. Why not?
Exactly. And so a lot of time this stuff would get into churches through that kind of mode where somebody would just grab a couple of the nicest sounding terms and say, well, we need to be more like this. Of course, because Jesus is not racist, right? And it's like, well, right. Yes, but, right? And so that's where you used to encounter it. It was, you would hear these things and you'd say, wait a second, where did you get that?
Yeah, that's what I used to say a lot. Remember, I'd say, we don't need anybody but Jesus to teach us about justice and love.
Exactly. And it would, at some point, it was happening so frequently, it was like seeing your kid walk through the kitchen with a chef's knife. You're like, hey, like, where put that back? Like, where did you get that?
This reminds me of? This is a digression inside a digression. But do you remember the bit from Parks and Rec where they're going through all the different slogans that their town has had?
I think so.
And one of the running jokes is anytime there's a war, they change it to like, welcome Japanese soldiers, welcome Vietnamese soldiers. Right. But there's one part where it's like, welcome to Pawnee, engage with Zorp, and she goes, our town was taken over by a weird cult in the 70s. And then like the next one is, welcome to Pawnee. It's safe to live here now. And that's like the meme for what wokeness was in America. For a while, our country was taken over by a weird cult, but it's weird. It's okay to live here now. What I'm trying to say with all that, we're not going to do another anti-woke podcast. We've done enough of them, and I'm frankly tired of talking about it. But here's what I want to use that article, which just got me thinking like this, which is, these ideas fostered in the university, which is a specific kind of place where there's a peer review doesn't work. I mean, it is a system of self-gratification and round, everybody scratches each other's back. And what you're doing is you can't really oppose somebody who has authority or power over you, because your career might not get done, and also because it's a bunch of eggheads that are only thinking and are not actually having to implement these ideas. So once that idea hit the corporations and it hit churches and it hit the street and it hit the internet, it was really, if you think about it, for as long as these things were in incubation, decades in the universities, they hit the real world and they died less than 5 years. They were done.
Right.
You know, so you field tested the ideas, and all of your highfalutin thoughts now, you can't say, well, no, it's all just about peace and love. No, it's not, because we saw what you're like when you implement these ideas, kind of like communism, right? We've tried it a few times. You know what it is. So what this got me thinking was not specifically related to this issue, but all the things that I could have called out in that article if I didn't know anything about this movement, and I'm not going to reference Heidegger, and I'm not going to talk about critical theory, would have been things that a non-academic isn't going to pick up on it, but a pastor will pick up on other sorts of things. He'll pick up on simple things, like I just said, like, well, wait a minute, no, we don't want to center any racial kind of church. That's the exact opposite of what the Bible tells us to do. Or, what do you mean somebody is going to approach the Bible thinking they already have? There's a line in there that, they were saying we need to approach the scriptures in order to extract the lesson that we know God has given us, which is like, no, that's eisegesis. We don't do that. It's very basic things. But when pastors tend to raise those objections to the academy, they tend to laugh it off because you just don't know. It's more nuanced than you understand. But this is what I'll say. Professors need pastors. That's my phrase for the day. Professors need pastors. I mean,
T-shirt.
What's that?
T-shirt.
Put it on a T-shirt. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. What does Shaq say? The underdog, put that on a T-shirt. Yeah. We're gonna start saying that. But yeah, professors need pastors, and by that I mean Christian academics who are in that academic world and coming up with their ideas and their theories. This includes theologians and Bible scholars and everything else. They need the office of the pastor in their life, because they serve an important function. But here's what pastors do that regular professors do not. Pastors have to preach these things to real people that are smart and savvy, and in many cases more intelligent than people that came up with them, and also are not beholden to a system of, oh wow, that's the accepted literature. It's like, that's stupid. That's who cares? I'm not doing that. And I think that you kind of saw that too. That it wasn't the Christian elite teachers that pushed back on this stuff. It was individual churches. It was pastors. It was Christians online that pushed back against this stuff. And I believe that is the function of the pastor, among other things, is that when ideas come down, even when they are being generated in this environment that I think has its benefits, their job is to have a real world perspective. It's kind of like the nerds have to bring it to the jocks so that the jocks can make fun of it and see if it stands the test of time. It's almost how it feels. Like, you know what I mean, Zach? You've got to have a real world collision, and pastors need to be providing that for the books that are being written and the theologies that are coming out and what's happening in the seminaries.
Well, otherwise you create this weird environment where, like you said, here's all the eggheads over here, and we're not making, look, we are talking on a podcast about a Festschrift, okay? We know who we are.
By egghead, what I mean is, the academic type, not a smart person, an academic, which are not always overlapping.
But like the guys who, we like that stuff. We love to read, we love to study, we love to write. These things are all great, but you have to understand, if that's the kind of person that God has made you to be, you need people in your life to, like what we're saying, field test your ideas. I came up with this awesome idea that's going to change all of Bible scholarship. You need, try that on the back row. Like have somebody say, well, hang on a second. I don't think so. And if you don't have that in your life, you need to get that, or you need to get in touch with somebody who has that happening regularly for them. A pastor who is a person who is going to say, well, look, if I say that out loud in my church, here is the 3 things people are going to immediately say that you have not thought of because you're not in contact with that kind of reality all the time.
Right. Yeah, and that's important. I mean, we could do a whole podcast another time on elitism, and because there gets to be this kind of thought that,
yes,
look, I'm a PhD theology professor, I know more than my pastor, and there, it doesn't matter how long you've been. It's like there's a rank. It's a hierarchy, almost like a caste system, which is very much how the academy is run. Universities almost run on a caste system.
The academy is run.
If you're up here, you're up here. You're a full professor. So right. It doesn't matter what the assistant junior professor says. You're you, and you have the authority to crush them. Well, some of that, not always, but I think Liberty is as good as anybody at making sure that they honor pastors in this regard. I'm specifically talking about seminaries here, not as universities now. But there can be a thought that, I listen to my pastor and I hear what he says and it's great, but I heard this a lot in seminary. We know that, you say that, but that's kind of been disproven and debunked. And first of all, I hate that attitude. And if you're a Bible scholar and a Bible teacher, then why are you holding back like that instead of helping? But anyway, but the other way of looking at this is you need guys that have been in ministry, faithfully preaching the word week in and week out for decades. They're going to have a breadth of knowledge that might be greater than your specific knowledge that these guys tend to have. And to be able to call out and notice things. And some of the problem is a lot of seminaries will have pastoral councils, and they get pastors to do exactly this. But here's the problem. They pick the same kinds of pastors that are the seminary professors. They pick the guys that are credentialed. They pick the guys that have been seminary professors or familiar with the literature. And what ends up happening is they end up perpetuating the same kind of thing. When what you need is you need some good old boys, man. You need some old linebackers. You need some guys that, that know what they're talking about, but they're not interested in impressing you. They're there to hold you accountable. I think this is important because we read Christian books, and I read a ton. I read exegetical academic commentaries. I read theology journals. Like I seriously do these things, so I care about it. And I think it's important. But I'm seeing this now as a pastor, and we've just kind of lived through a very important example of this, where the Lord did not institute the office of professor. The Lord instituted the office of pastor teacher.
T-shirt.
And well, there you go. But the teachers in the church are not necessarily the professors in the university, and there is a pastoral authority that comes along. There's, dare I say, an apostolic authority that comes with the actual leaders in the church. If you receive, some of these, I'll just go and be mean because I'm not trying to call out everybody, but there's a certain kind. And if you are an academic, you know exactly what kind of person I'm talking about. So I'm not going to apologize anymore, but some of these professors, they treat their authority in the church like Anakin in the Return of the the Revenge of the Sith, that like he's been appointed to the Jedi Council by the Emperor, and they're like, the Emperor doesn't have authority to assign council members, right?
He's
like,
somehow outside
dangerous
the
and
command
disturbing
chain.
this is, right?
Right.
So he's kind of there, but they kind of swagger in and like, well, since I have my degrees, I get to have some say here, and that's just simply not how we do it in the Lord's church. So Zach, I just professors need pastors is what I'm trying to say, and that why don't you just kind of explain, because I know you love to talk about this. This is why we are trying to develop pastor-generated resources here. That's our vision for Ironworks.media, not in opposition to academic resources, but as a supplement, and maybe even sometimes as a check on those things.
Yeah, it's like a check and balance system. If it's functioning correctly, the scholarly members of the body of Christ are doing all this hard work, providing us all this value, all this research and work and thought and prayer, hopefully, that's going into all this, and that's amazing. But we can be tempted, I think, to equate intelligence and goodness in the church. Those are not the same thing. If you are you getting smarter is not the same thing as you getting more like Jesus.
Yeah. Knowledge puffs up.
Yeah, it might. Now it might be it's good, right? You don't want to be stupid. You don't want to be unwise. You don't want to be a fool. But we have this idea that that, like you said, because that guy is credentialed and he's smart and he's intelligent, his advice and opinion on church matters more than that pastor over there because that pastor doesn't have those things. Look, that pastor might be like, please forgive me for saying it like this, but that pastor might be objectively dumber than that academic. That's quite possible. But he also might be much holier than that academic. He might have much more discernment. He might be a more spiritual man. And in in fact, I'd say almost all of the things. He might
know God.
Yeah, exactly, like straight up. And in almost all of the things that we need to talk about in the church, that's what matters. That's the metric we need to measure by. So this idea that when you get more intellectual, you'll really understand. Okay, maybe, but it's also entirely possible that your intellectualism is blinding you to the spiritual truth that's at play here. And I think that the topic we talked about, with this intellectual idea that blew through the church. And it's not just wokeness. Every 2 years, one of these comes
there's going to be another thing.
There's going to be another thing.
In just a couple years.
So many times, if you had just listened to your run-of-the-mill, bog standard, average little non-denominational church pastor or whatever, he was calling this.
Yep.
Like, give pastors their due here. Average pastors were saying, that's weird. Well, but have you engaged with the research? No, it's just weird. Yeah. I don't like it. And I don't feel good about it. That doesn't make sense because, I read the Bible and I prayed about it and it doesn't make sense. They don't always have.
And sometimes there's what it is too? There's an allergy to things that did not come from the scriptures because they've not been boiling in the pot so long.
Yeah.
If you arrive at something through years of speculation and theorizing and research, you can start to miss some of the fact that you're getting off base, and somebody comes in cold and they go, "What is that? It smells weird."
Yep.
No, you just don't understand. Like, I don't think you understand. That there's a fresh perspective can be useful and helpful. So this is just a interesting little conversation I wanted us to have. Is the church needs to be speaking out, and there's a great article by John Piper that I read a long time ago, which is about pastors need to be the ones that are writing the books and giving the teachings, but again, we can come back to
We're Not Professionals article.
I don't know.
Or a different
I don't know.
Anyway,
I read that book so long ago, but the problem is we can talk about elitism again. These universities will close ranks on these things where, if pastors say something like, it seems like everybody we send off to Bible college comes back frozen. The professors will get offended and defend that. But if they say, well, there has been an infiltration of this ideology and it has resulted in a suboptimal, result. It's like, yeah, they were calling this and you were too offended to notice. So,
I also think
that's go ahead and wrap this up.
I was going to say, I also think it's not just academics. It's like, and I'm just going to say this kindly as I can, but I think that the same thing happens with like parachurch and like church consultant type people.
There we go. Yeah, we're going to get off a whole other podcast
Do you see what I'm saying? Where it's like, it's this idea that like, okay, you're this little average church pastor and you don't really know what you're doing with this and that, but let me come help you. Let me explain to you.
Let me tell you what you're doing wrong.
Yeah, let me tell you let me tell you what you don't, you don't understand how this is really what's going on. And I see this a lot of times with like, especially with right now, because of this work that I'm doing with a ministry tool that this guy's working on. I see this all the time, where this really bad attitude that comes up towards pastors, where guys will say, pastors don't really understand. Really, what we need is some experts on technology in the ministry, and they can tell us. And I'm like, the average church pastor has a pretty good gag reflex for bad stuff.
Yes,
in my
gag
opinion,
reflex could sum up just about everything we've been saying.
The average church pastor can figure out. The average church pastor has figured out a bunch of seismic shifts in culture and technology that waylaid everybody else. And most average churches like, I'll do this, but not that. This works, but not that.
Yeah, let's hand the church over to tech bros. That's what.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So I think
work.
it's like, you know what? Like, you got to give more credit. I know that people have had these bad experiences with church, and you think that is everybody. No, like on average, your pastor filled with the Holy Spirit kind of knows what he's doing. Like maybe props to him, And
the
I think
average local church held the line on all this stuff, and it was the ones that fell were the ones that were the most elitist and had given in the most to the social status that comes along with this, and were more willing to listen to the academic than the Christian pastor.
And I think that informs
that tells you something.
I think that informs the way that we approach what we do with Ironworks too, like because we talk about this all the time, that we're kind of low church supremacy people, right? Where it's like not just to be like, look, t-shirt, but look, like we think that the average stuff that the average church is doing is great. We're not looking down our nose at it. We're not saying, oh, well, if only you were like, no, we think it's dope that God is doing this stuff, and we're not looking to class it up or intellectualize it any further than we need to. And I think that by focusing, like you said, on, okay, how can we, instead of going out and importing from outside of outside of your local church, sometimes outside of the church period, import all these resources to tell us what to think? How about we just do it ourselves?
Yeah.
How about pastors filled with the Holy Spirit who have the experience, who have the road miles, who have field tested all these ideas? How about let's just write them down and share them together? I think that gets us most of the way. Is there a need for scholarship and all this stuff? We know there is. We're in a room with a bunch of books.
Yeah, this isn't a knock against scholarship. This is a knock against. Well, it's not even a knock. It's a reminder that there is a function that a pastor has that a Christian professor, and I mean academic, I mean scholar, whatever, that professional capacity, that you need the man that God has ordained in your local church to check it sometimes, and that's part of the function of the church, and that's why we do what we do. And God only created one institution on the earth, and it was the church. And so that's it's important for us to remember. All right, Zach. Well, we're going to get into our study here of Matthew chapter 6, which is chapter 2 of the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to finish it this week, and next time we're going to come back probably with a different series, take a little break, do some other stuff. I'm not really sure what we're going to do next. Something always comes up, but we're just going to get right into this. Why don't you read Matthew 6:25 for us, and we'll get started from there.
Because of this, I say to you, worry not about your lives, what you might eat or what you might drink, nor about your bodies, what you might wear. Is not life more than food, and the body than clothing?
So Jesus is telling us here not to worry. The Sermon on the Mount, remember, has been all about sincerity. It's been all about believing the Lord is who he says he is. We're coming on the heels of his instruction to not serve money, but to serve the Lord instead. And so it makes sense, because the first reaction you'd probably get, Zach, to somebody when you tell them you can't serve God and money, don't make your life all about money and making stuff, probably the first response you'll get is, well, I got to take care of my family. I've got to provide for my needs. Where is my food going to come from? And that's I'll just ask you this quick question before we continue, Zach. Do you find that sometimes people use everyday necessities as justification for mishandling money or being too obsessed with money because, well, I got to put food on the table, and when it's like, no, what you're doing is you're obsessing over your status or your money or whatever it is.
People. I mean, I am people. I mean, that's a pretty common thing that I think we all do. Is you get this attitude of like, well, it's only wise to stay up super late and always think about the money. It's like, no, that's not wise. That's biblically a problem, right? So I think that we're tempted to think we'll find any other label for our worry that we can that will class it up and make it feel like it's not a sin problem, an issue we have. And obviously we're not talking about this attitude of like, oh, none of it matters. I'm not going to work hard. God's just going to drop things on me from the sky. We obviously know that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is this fixation on, but what about, like Jesus says, but what about my food? But what about my clothing? And the answer to that is, don't worry about that.
Yeah, that's what's so wonderful. He says, don't worry about that.
Right.
But your food, your drink, or your clothing. And his response, I love at the end of verse 25, which this is such a great sentence from our Lord. He says, is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? He's saying, don't you have more important things to be focused on? And he's going to tell us what those are as we go. But he's reminding us that if you're going to be basically selling your soul, is how we might say it, in order to accumulate things and accumulate stuff out of fear for your life and your body and your food or your lifestyle or your tax bracket, the Lord, he comes to you and he says, isn't life more than that? Isn't life about more than that? Zach, what's your favorite example here of a book or movie or a piece of media that loves to talk about how, can't buy me love, right? There's the Beatles song, right? Money's not the most important thing, love is. We hear this message a lot. And, what's an example for you of places that we hear that message told, that money's not the most important thing and your stuff doesn't make you?
I feel like everybody's on like this minimalism kick, or has been for like all these years. So, and what's really funny about that is it's kind of the most anti-materialist thing ever, because they're telling you like, oh, you really shouldn't be held in chains by all this stuff. Really what you should have is 7 things in your house, look, and then each individual thing they show on the picture is like $30,000.
Yeah,
and it's like
rich people hobbies, man.
Right? It's kind of silly, right? but there's that idea that everybody talks about now is what a Marie Kondo or whatever, like you should only have what sparks joy in your life, and you should just get rid of other things, and this idea that really all of this, and I think it comes from a good place, all this material stuff is like bogging you down and pulling you down, and you need to be kind of free of all those cares and concerns that you're accumulating literally with that stuff.
And I think that's something that Christians can affirm. It totally is. We have way too many things in our house. We just cleared out our garage. I always think of Fight Club when I think of this.
I figured you'd say Fight Club.
The stuff you own ends up owning you. Right. I'm like, dude, hey, I'll just say amen to that. I got no criticism there. You're not your job, you're not your khakis, you're not how much money you have in the bank. Yeah, that's true. That's all biblical. And guess what? You didn't need to go to Tyler Durden to learn that. You could have gone to Jesus to learn that.
What's the Christian version of Fight Club? You don't remember? Have we talked about Jungle Jam and Friends, the radio show before?
Jungle Jam and Friends.
So it was on right before Adventures in Odyssey. So we were, that was the slot we hit. But they had an episode where they all started yard sailing to each other, because all the animals are freaking out and saying, the more you have to take care of the things you have. And so they're all trying to sell stuff to each other. They end up selling all the contents of each other's yards to each other. And all the animals had the same amount of stuff that they started with. And
how you like that?
So, right. Sometimes I think it is kind of funny though, that like, I always remember my dad would quote that whenever something broke at the house. He'd say, the more you have to take care of it.
Or like Madame Blueberry.
Right.
How much stuff do you need to be happy? I don't know. How much stuff is there?
Right.
That's such a great line. Yep. But I mean, what Jesus is telling us, we're being a little silly here, is I'm just trying to say that you can see this affirmed even in culture. And that I think the reasons that, something like Fight Club is so compelling about, I don't want to spend my life just acquiring a bunch of stuff while I just turn into a soft little pool of tapioca pudding.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's biblical. That's the Spirit of the Lord speaking. Now, the solution that is given in that story is certainly not the one that you want to follow, but I like to affirm what we can sometimes, because sometimes the most compelling parts of culture can have a gem of truth in the middle of it. So what he's telling us is not to be worrying even about simple things like food and clothing. And I'll tell you, there's some people that I've told this to, and they get a little upset. And I have to remind them that Jesus said it, not me, because they say it's unfair to ask somebody not to worry, because you're, two things. Number one, they say it's just unrealistic and you're going to worry. It's what people do. But secondly, people say it's insensitive to people who have anxiety problems. Now, as somebody who himself has had anxiety problems, I'm going to say it like it is, which is, yes, sometimes we have those things that blow through, and yet the solution to having anxious thoughts is not, well, you just settle into your anxiety and learn to love it. The goal is to not be anxious. He tells us not to be worried about things. And so much of our stress that comes into our life is from us worrying about, what do I have and what are we going to have tomorrow? And for us in America, it's not even, am I going to be able to eat tomorrow? It's, are we going to be able to, buy the boat on schedule? Are we going to be able to get the, new cleats for the kids' football season, or are we going to have to get used ones? And we compare ourselves one to another that way, even though it seems like everybody is sick of that game, but we all keep playing it for some reason. He's telling us, look, there's more to life than that, and the spiritual things in life, and not even just the spiritual like in religious, but matters of your heart and your emotional life and your family, and we're going to get to all this in just a little bit, but like he's saying there's more to life than that, so don't let it dominate your thoughts. That's what he's saying. Don't let your constant worry about, are we going to have enough, are we going to have more, are we going to keep growing, don't let that dominate the way you live your life, because there's more to life than that. I mean, Zach, that's pretty basic, right? That there's more to life than what you have and what you own and what you eat.
I feel like the pushback to this comes from people that are putting it on themselves. Like if you read Jesus' tone isn't like this stern drill sergeant, like you've got to stop worrying. It's like this parental tone of like, what are you worrying about that for? I got that,
yes,
right? Like it's like when you've got your kid. I don't know if your kids do this, but they'll my kids are often they're often quite concerned about what is the sustenance plan for the day. Who has the quartermaster filed the change order for lunch? That's often a concern for them.
My kids are more like pigeons. Like when we go into the kitchen, they just kind of bump against your ankles.
So like
go, no, shoot,
there's
go
the
away.
question, right? Of like, well, what will lunch be? And sometimes I'll lovingly say, like, look, I got that. Like I've got a plan for that. We know where the food is going to come from. Like I got that. And I think sometimes.
Okay, what are your KPIs for this lunch plan today,
right,
Dad?
Like, no, I'm on that, right? And I think this is the way Jesus is sharing this. He's saying, hey, you don't have to worry about that. Why? Because you've just got to, it's not a Buddhist injunction. You must let go of your material concerns and just float in nirvana. He's like, no, I know you need the thing.
Yes.
I'm not telling you you've got to let go of it so you can be starved. He's saying, I got the thing. I want to give you the thing, but just let me handle it. I got it. You don't be worried about that.
That's the difference is,
right.
There's something to the idea of let go of your material concerns, but it's different. And the key difference is it's not stop needing that thing.
Right.
It's trust God to give you the things you need. So they feel very similar, but the root is very, very different. Mm-hmm. And that's I think that's true of a lot of what you might call so-called noble ideas that you find out in the world, is that they're failing to incorporate the Lord and his son Jesus into it. Right. So we're not talking about not worrying. And I just want to say one thing more briefly just here about, I hate to say it like this, but there are trends that go through society, especially related to problems and mental issues. And, when I was a kid, cutting was a big problem. And then when I got a little older, more kids had eating disorders. And then there was, the next thing. And now it's anxiety. Everyone has anxiety. Everybody's depressed. These things blow through. And I really want to encourage some of you who listen that maybe you're on medicines or you've been spending years defining yourself by your mental problems. Learn to let those things go to the Lord Jesus. He doesn't desire you to be walking in those things. And that modern therapy says, no, you need to own that's what you are and define yourself that way so that you can. The Lord says, hey, I've told you not to worry and not to be anxious, Philippians 4. And he wants to set you free from those things. And I would encourage you not to let that become your identity. And for some people, it becomes like their It's like when you used to wear patches on your backpack. Like it's, well, I'm an anxious and I'm a depressive and I'm a borderline personality disorder. And, you almost wear it like, but if I don't have this, then what makes me interesting? That can be a problem. I stopped at Hot Topic a lot. I know what I'm talking about here, okay? Trust that the Lord wants to take care of you and deliver you from those things. And don't give up, and don't let your doctor tell you that religious solutions are unable to access the solutions to these problems, because I've seen it time and time again in my own life, friend. I know what I'm talking about. So do not be anxious for anything. All right, let's move on to the next section. Verse 26 through 30, and again, this is my translation, so sometimes it's a little out of order from what we're used to, but I like getting us the actual text here, because this passage in particular has an interesting example. So Zach, will you read us verses 26 through 30 of Matthew?
It says, "Look at the bird of heaven that do not sow, nor reap, nor gather into barns, and your Father in heaven feeds them. Are you not valued more than they? But which among you, by worrying, is able to add to his life 1 cubit? And concerning clothing, why do you worry? Consider the flowers of the field, how they grow, neither toiling nor spinning. But I say to you that neither Solomon in all his glory was arrayed as one of these. But if the grass of the field, which today is, and tomorrow into the oven is cast, God thus clothes, will he not much more to you, little faiths?" It's a little hyphen faiths.
Yeah, little faiths. That's actually the word that he uses.
That's so interesting.
He's calling them little faiths. We say you of little faith, but literally he's talking to them and he's calling them little faiths. It's micro faiths. It's a gentle rebuke. He's like, don't you have enough faith? And he said, well, how can you tell me not to worry? There's all sorts of problems in the world. He says, well, look at the birds. Doesn't God feed the birds? And don't the flowers of the field get taken care of? And if God's going to do that, won't he take care of you? And then in the middle, he has a very important point too. How is worrying going to help anything? When you worry about things, they don't get better. You don't, grow taller. You don't put hair back on your head by worrying about it. So in the same way, how are you worrying about your problems going to save anything? He says God is going to take care of you. And he says, telling us to look to God. This is the difference. We need to have a divine heavenly perspective on these things. And it all comes back to faith. How do I remove my anxiety? You need to build your faith in the Lord. You need to get to know the Lord so that you can look at something like the crows hopping along the freeway, picking worms out of the ground and say, if God can provide food for that ugly thing, surely he can provide food for us. We are more valuable than that. There's your answer to the vegans, by the way, the idea that we're no better than the little piglets and stuff. Like, no, you're valued more than they, the Lord says. So not only is worry not helpful, but it's foolish when you consider that the Lord loves us and he's there to take care of us. So, Zach, it's all about trusting that the Lord is going to be a good father and look after us. And kind of like you were just talking about with your kids, that they need to remember that, hey, I've never had you miss a meal before, so why are you worried about today's? I've got this one. And not falling into that and learning to train yourself to believe God, not to just stop worrying, just to chill out, but to teach you to trust the Lord and that God has got this one and he will.
Yeah, I think that as someone who also kind of the Lord's been giving victory in over the years over like just normal anxieties that we all have. That's the other thing too, is like the idea that somebody's anxious. It's like everybody has anxieties. That's why the Bible says it so broadly to everybody. We all deal with these things, these worries, these stresses, right? But one of the things that I have found is very frequently the more that you have given yourself over to these things, it is inverse to like how much you are aware of the actual personality of God. Like getting to know God as a person. The more I have got to know God as a person, the less these anxieties and worries plague me. I mean, it doesn't mean they disappear, right? You have these concerns, you have these anxieties, things blow through your mind. But as you get to know God better, it's like, oh, well, yeah, but that didn't sound like God. Oh, yeah, well, that's not what God would do. Oh, well, yeah, but God said that he has that. Like the answer to it is not, like you said, it's not just trying to force yourself in the flesh to, no, I just simply won't feel these feelings.
No, it's about looking upward.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of this like, not in a Buddhist way necessarily. It's just kind of letting go of like, you just learn to shrug like, that's not.
Let go and let God, as they say.
Yeah,
like,
which I know sounds silly, but like genuinely when in dealing with this, there is a certain thing, and you can see what Jesus is saying. He's kind of just pointing them to certain things and saying, look, here's an example of why this is not as big a deal as you feel like it is right now. And it's okay to just sort of shrug and say, I think Dad's got that one. And that's really the prescription that Jesus is giving them for this.
Right. And I've found that those of us that are obsessive about our anxiety or, whatever problem that we have, when you bring up the Lord to them, the first thing they want to do is start detailing all of the terrible problems that they have. And they but don't you see the size of what we're dealing with here? But that in itself is the issue. You're looking to the problem. You're staring at the waves. You're not staring at the Lord that's walking on the waves. And that's not just a cliche. There's a reason that the Lord did that, is he tells us, hey, I want you to keep your eyes on me. I can tell you guys, the Lord has answered every prayer I've ever given to him. And I do not have a theology of resigning yourself to the way things are. I have a theology of trusting God and seeing that the Lord answers my prayers. I mean, it's something that I can't even talk about publicly yet, but I was praying for something yesterday, and God answered my prayer that afternoon, like specifically answered that exact prayer. Like, God, you just take care of us. And we've got to learn to not look at prayer as well, let's be realistic here. No, God looks to us and he's taking care of us. He looks for, how many times has he brought you through something else? We got to look back on all the things that God has brought you through, all the struggles, all the bad presidencies, all the the weird social movements that you've lived through, all the political events and the wars and the famines and the hard times and the late bills and the fights with your wife. Like, God has brought you through all that. So how are you going to look up to him now and say, but this time is different, and this time, I'm just so worried and so nervous. When you get worried and nervous, you need to train yourself that it's time to hit your knees and seek the Lord's face. Not asking him just to remove your anxiety, but to say, God, help me to turn my eyes upon you and to hear you. We just talked about this last night with Elijah, how Elijah was sent to Mount Carmel, or not to Mount Carmel, Mount Sinai, after Mount Carmel. And before God answered his problem, he was suicidal. He wanted God to kill him. But before God even answered his questions, first of all, the Lord told him to eat something and to take a nap, which I think is pretty important. But secondly, the Lord reminded him that it's not about the fire or the earthquake. It's about him. It's his still small voice. He was saying, you need to get back in touch with me, Elijah. And somebody who will dismiss getting back in touch with the Lord is usually not in touch with the Lord. And you need to get into the Word and remind yourself what God has done, and pray and be around godly people that are going to help you get a proper perspective on things. All right, verses 31 through 32, Zach.
It says, therefore, worry not, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For all of these things the Gentiles seek after, for your heavenly Father knows you need all these.
Now, Zach, why would he say all these things the Gentiles seek after? What is he trying to communicate to these Jews that the Gentiles, they didn't want to be like them? Why would he say it like that?
Well, the Jews were super disdainful of the Gentiles. It was this whole thing of like, we're special, we're different, we've been set apart. Look at what God's done for us. We're the chosen ones in there. In fact, it had gotten, by the time of Jesus, it had gotten to this really gross level where they were basically kind of debating whether or not the Gentiles were human. I mean, they were. It was pretty rough, right? So it's this. They had this attitude of like, oh, well, we're special, and we're going to get the Messiah, and all these things are going to happen to us. And so it's almost like he's kind of judo leveraging that and saying, oh, you're so special. Well, look, you're acting just like those Gentiles over there. Look what the Gentiles do. Obsessively running around all the time, so worried about whether they're going to be able to eat tomorrow. It's like, you're not that much different from me. Me looking at it, you don't seem that much different than the Gentiles. The Gentiles do that.
Right, and also the main thing was that the Gentiles didn't know the Lord.
Right.
I love reading. We'd mentioned this earlier with the Assyria book, but I love reading old epics. I love reading, the Greek epics. I love reading the Roman ones. I love reading the Norse legends and reading Beowulf and the Epic of Gilgamesh. Like these old stories. Like, do you have a favorite one of those, Zach? Do you have a favorite epic?
It'd be usually the one I just finished the Iliad, which is the one I've read last, so I'll say the Iliad for right now. The Iliad's really good.
Do you like the Iliad better than the Odyssey?
No, actually the other way around. I like the Odyssey better than the Iliad. Because I feel like the Iliad is good, but the Iliad, it has to be faced, is mostly conversations between guys. And the Odyssey is cool because it has the conversations, but you've also got, and then they went here and they did this. It's like a travelogue a little more. Right. So I tend to like the Odyssey. They're both great, but
I think I like the Aeneid better than both the Odyssey and the Iliad, actually, if I'm being honest with you. And I'm about to read again the what is it called? The Saga of the Volsungs. Which has Sigismund and Sigurd and Brunhilde is in it, and that's Norse legends. But what you see when you read those, I mean, it's literature and it's culture, and you read these things, and sometimes there's even modern things that are written in that style that are fun to read. I would even put Paradise Lost in that category. It's an epic, and I think Paradise Lost is better than just about anything else. It's the best thing ever written in English, first of all. But secondly, when you look at these old gods, and the way that the gods interacted with people. Like, this is why he's calling them that you're being like the Gentiles. I mean, you just read the Iliad. The Iliad is, I heard somebody say, you can read the Iliad as from the perspective of a normal hoplite soldier in the Trojan War, that you are basically caught between these gods and these demigods, and it's all about them. And you die by the thousands in battle, but the heroes always get rescued at the last second by their favorite god. Or this goddess is playing against this god, and they're going to save Paris from being killed, and that's going to prolong the war, and it's going to lead to the death of Achilles. And it's so capricious. And we're going to do a sacrifice for Poseidon, so he'll help us. But somebody accidentally sneezed during the third oblation, so now he's mad. And like there's Ovid in the book The Metamorphoses kind of points that out a lot, that the gods kind of just do whatever they want. And the best thing you can do is to kind of get out of their way and hope that they don't come to you. Yeah. God forbid that one of them thinks you're attractive, because you're going to get raped by this god, and then you're going to, be transformed into a tree or something like that. And so, I mean, the capriciousness of the gods, right, Zach? I mean, that's universal.
It's also petty. And when you talking about the Iliad, like even the heroes of that culture get formed in the image of their gods. So when you look at the great
those who worship them become like
them.
Right.
So the great human leaders that are supposed to be like held up as heroes in this story, and the story is not unaware of it. It points out where its heroes are being silly and petty, but at the same time, it's like they're all like that. All of their heroes are. It's all about, well, you took away my girlfriend, and now I'm not going to go fight for you, and I'm just going to sit here while you all die. And it's all so small. All the little fights and the pettinesses are small, and then you zoom out to the gods, and the gods are arguing with each other, and Zeus is kind of henpecked by his wife, and it's all just silly, right? And I agree with you that when Jesus is pointing, he's kind of saying, look, your little petty concerns are not worthy of the God that you're saying you're worshiping.
That's exactly it.
Right? Like you're saying you worship me. Okay, great. I'm not concerned about these things for you. I'm not running around worried about it. Why are you worried about it? You're not being like me in the way that you're obsessed with these little issues. You're being like these other people who their God doesn't answer their prayers. So they're super worried.
You never know what they're going to do.
Exactly.
Right? You can just hope to appease their favor a little bit, and God comes in and he says, I'm not like that.
Right.
Jesus teaches us that you're worrying about what you're going to eat and drink and what you're going to wear. He says that's what those people that don't know God think, because they're under the authority of these usurping demons that are in rebellion against the Lord and drunk on their own power and playing these games with their people, and it's not worthy of it. I'd say in the same way, for those of us who are believers, if we're going to say, well, I just got to be a practical person, and you kind of live as a practical atheist, then you're doing the same thing. You're not gaining the benefits of serving the Lord Jesus.
Right.
The moral and mental benefits of serving Jesus, that you can walk through life in peace and in joy. And if you're going to say, well, I just have to be practical all the time, the Bible is very practical. What we mean when we say that is, I probably have to sin in order to make this happen. But you know what this reminds me of, and I want to talk about this for a while here. This is something that God has been teaching me lately, and I'll express it to you like this. For a while, when we moved into this building as a church, and then we expanded out to the sanctuary, there were several big things on the list that needed to be done in order to maximize what we were doing. We believe that God adds to the church, but if your church is going to be dirty and you're not going to start on time and you're going to preach like you just made it up on the spot, well, no one's going to come, nor should they, right? So we looked around, and I remember it was when you first came on staff, the first thing I said was, go find us a building, see what's out there, and you all know the story, and that led to where now we are constructing a building. But in the meantime, I was like, well, let's see what else. And we took a lot of time in the sanctuary, helping the worship team get plussed up, getting drums, getting lights for the stage, helping the sound team, brushing up our YouTube channel and the internet ministry. This is part of what we're doing right here. We did this with the youth children's ministry, where we now have digital check-in and we have background checks. And the youth group, we started a youth group, and we've been paying attention to the front lobby and welcoming people. We went through this whole process as a church, and we kind of reached a point where we've done all the things that there are to be done. And if you were to look at what we're doing, there's no one thing I believe that you could point at and say, this is why the church is not growing. Like, okay, yeah, if you're wondering why people aren't coming, well, if everybody's really mean at the door and they don't know where to go when they walk in, maybe that's why. Well, we kind of plugged all those holes in the dike, you know what I'm saying? So then I start thinking to myself, okay, well, what's next? The next big thing was, well, you need a new location, and that's already being provided for. But, we're sitting with probably 18 months to go until we, or maybe even longer, until we get into that next building.
Right.
So there was a period there where I hadn't quite realized yet that we had crossed over the threshold. And there were a couple things, none of which were too serious, but where we put a whole lot of work, you and me, Zach, into getting things ready, and a lot of volunteers put in a lot of time to do some things. And you kind of have in the back of your mind, well, once we do this, then we're going to have 10,000 people come into the church. And, you start to get diminishing returns on some of those things. And the church is fine. Well, I'm not complaining. We were starting to realize, really the only thing that remains to be done that could make it easier for the church to grow and for our ministry to expand is, well, we need to get into a better place. We're already working on that. So then what do we do with all of this excess energy? And I found ourselves, I don't think we did this for too long, Zach. I think that we kind of crossed over a line somewhere and realized, kind of like this happens I'm going to use a video game analogy where, the first time you kill a boar in World of Warcraft, like you're going to level up. But next time you need to kill like 5 to level up. And then you got to, kill 25 and now you level up again. And then eventually you get to a point where doing the same kinds of things is it's going to benefit you, but it's going to benefit like a 1/100%. Well, we kind of reached that point as a congregation where there's always better things and more things you can do, but we realized that we were putting a lot of effort into things that were kind of giving us that 1/100%, boost, and it was not really worth the energy we were putting into it. And we kind of had a meeting recently and talked about this. Zach, do you just kind of maybe expand on what I was just talking about and kind of what I was feeling about how we were not spinning our wheels, but we were just doing too much.
Well, I think it's
too much stuff and putting in too much time for things that were not really going to give us big reward for the effort we were putting into it.
I think that it's really, we're big Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome fans here, and I love that book.
Kent Hughes, go read it, friends.
6 out of 5 stars, right? And the thing he talks a lot about how you can be doing some of the exact same things, but the mentality and the mindset behind them, the intention behind them, and your heart towards the Lord makes all the difference, right? It's not necessarily even about like, oh, if you really have a great heart for the ministry, you won't do that nasty, dirty, hard work thing. You'll just sit there and float. It's not that. It's that, hey, the hard work you're doing, sometimes and I think we had kind of crossed this little line. I kind of compared it, I think even that meeting, to like when you're switching gears on a bike where, okay, right now.
You got up the hill.
Yeah, we got up the hill, and now we're still in the same gear we're using to get up the hill, and that's not the gear we need right now. We need to kind of go a little slower because we're up the hill, and we need to switch, but we were kind of spinning. It's like, no, we need to switch gears so that we can keep going at this good speed, because now we're on this level ground where we're not up a hill anymore. And I think that by right before we switched, I think there was a lot of, we would notice for each other, for ourselves, I'm just coming in, I'm really worried about, and then I would look at my to-do list and I would say, what am I so worked up about?
Right. There's not that much stuff on the list right now.
Yeah. And then what the temptation is, unfortunately, I think sometimes with the flesh, you say, well, I can fix that. Like, I'll go find some things to worry about. Here's some other stuff.
Right.
And I think we were learning and realizing, hey, if the Lord gives you a season of that, use it to do stuff that doesn't involve, all that cramming and stress,
all the grind, and
use it to work on all the other things that sometimes can go by the wayside in a busy season. Use it to build your relationship with the Lord. Use it to build your relationship with the people in the church. Use it to be in prayer. Use it, those are all things to do that you should be doing anyway.
Yeah,
right.
That was kind of where it led to. I sat us down, and I'd had a great word from Joel Dover, who came to the conference, and he had kind of told me about not pushing too hard, and letting the Lord do things in His time, and I received that. I didn't feel like he was rebuking me. I don't think he was. He was just giving his advice. And I went on a trip to Virginia, I believe it was, and while I was there, I thought about these things a little more and talked to my dad about it some. And when I came back, and you traveled right away as soon as I got back, and when you came back, I said, all right, man, here's what we're doing. We're going to throttle down. And it basically is the best thing we can do for this congregation. And again, I'm not talking like spiritually, like those things are all in place and they're just right. But, in terms of benefiting, blessing, growing, expanding the ministry, the best thing we can do is to build a new building and move locations. That is underway. That is being done. But it's going to take 18 to 20 months. It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
So what I said is, I do not want us to be spending the next 18 months to 2 years finding things to be busy about that is going to, we put in a level 100 effort and we get a 0.01 return on that effort. We might be doing good things. We might be, making things that are going to be beneficial, but is it really worth all of this extra energy? Sometimes as a church, you're tempted to do things for the sake of doing things because you feel successful, even though you've got the same 10 people coming to everything, and they were never in danger of leaving in the first place. And so what I said to us is we're just going to down throttle. And what I meant by that is we're not going to be chasing down a bunch of... I canceled some things that we had on the calendar because I'm like, there's really no need for us to do that. It's going to be fine. I said I want us to be... like you said, focusing on our devotional time here at the church, making sure that you and I are doing our devotions, reading our Bibles like we should. I said I was going to be spending more time going a little deeper in my Bible studies and try to grow and expand it a little more. And I also said, you and I both have young children, and these are the years where they're going to be little, and it's not going to last for very long. So since God has seen fit to bless us with a season of waiting, we're not going to waste it running around like chickens with our heads cut off. We're going to take that time to look to ourselves, look to our families, make sure that everything is going well at the church, but not to do more than we need to just for the sake of it, because those days are going to get busy again. Like we're going to move in that building, and it's going to be probably 5 years of nonstop. Whew! So if now we have 2 years, maybe less, where there's not a whole lot to be done other than doing the regular things, then do those things well. And if there's not so much to do, don't feel like you got to cram in the gaps. This was my way of responding to something that we noticed. And again, I don't think this is something we languished in, and I'm glad to say that. I think that like I said, we got up the hill, and that bike analogy is a good one, where, if you keep it in a really, really low gear when you're going up the hill because you want it to be easy to pedal, and it's hard because you're going up the hill, but then you get to the top, and all of a sudden your wheels are going, you gotta shift down to where it's harder to pedal, and you're still going to go fast, but you're not putting forth as much intense effort. This is our way of saying we're not going to worry about these things. The Lord's got it, and the Bible also tells us to rejoice with the brides of our youth, to take care of our family, not to eat the bread of anxious toil, but to trust the Lord. And, in the days of our youth, the Bible even says to enjoy them while you can, because they don't come around very often or for very long, and then they're gone. And I get advice from older pastors all the time who say, Tyler, go on vacations with your family. Just go places. If your kid has football practice, leave work early and go to the football practice. If your wife, has something going on, go to her thing. Don't be afraid to leave, especially young pastors. I'll say I'm very, very afraid to leave for what I feel like is an illegitimate reason, to miss a Sunday, because I'm afraid I'm going to come back and, everybody has been mad at me or something, Yeah. But we're trying very hard. I had the same talk with my wife, and I had it with you, Zach, and I've talked to some of our ministry team leaders. Guys, we're in a season of rest, so let's rest. And I think this goes along with what Jesus is talking here.
Yeah, and honestly, this should shock nobody, but Jesus' advice about how to handle these worries and stresses that come up, his advice is literally like, focus on the Lord and realize that it's not that big a deal. It's going to be okay. And actually, we even know scientifically about how stress works on your body, that if you get used to all that stimulus of stress, and then all of a sudden there's not that input anymore, your body misses it like a withdrawal. Your body's like, wait, it's supposed to be really freak out time. Where's freak out time? And your body will actually try and seek out that same stimulus, that same engagement, because you've fried your circuit that reads, are we in danger or not? And that's why sometimes I think you do have to be really careful as a believer of, what? It's not more holy necessarily to be busy, to be tired, to be stressed out. Those things are not better, right? Actually, in a lot of ways, it's showing that you're not relying on the Lord. When you're constantly fried and you're, oh my gosh, if I don't get a nap and we can't take a weekend off, we're just all going to tip over. That's not the place that the Lord wants you to be at. And it can be tempting. And I know this, I think as an assistant pastor, I think there's almost like a bigger temptation sometimes where if you're not running around on Sunday looking like something is going wrong, you feel bad. Or other people, or you think
right, like
you
you're
should
not
feel
working
bad.
hard enough.
Yeah, what's your problem, dude? You're sitting down and like what are you doing? But I think that comes a lot of times from pride, and it comes from where we're so used to that feeling that we don't know what we do with ourselves.
Right.
If we sat still for a minute.
That's like when we first got the delegation really set up at the church, because for a while it was you and me, our wives, Jacob and Ann, doing everything, and overseeing
Good
every
times,
single
man.
thing. And that's okay. That's what it had to be. They were the planting team. That's what it was for. Zach Borders as well. That's what it was. But over time, I remember we had a meeting where I said, guys, it is time to start giving away your ministries to somebody who did not come down from Lynchburg. Remember that meeting?
And it all happened immediately, and there was no problem.
Yeah.
But we all were a little worried, I think.
Well, when we got to that place, when you came on staff, that was a big thing for me. And then when everything was delegated out, among the ministry, my Sundays became very easy. Because all I really had to do was show up and preach and, talk to people and everything and lead worship sometimes. But those first few weeks, I was like nervous. And I'm like, everybody's going to think that I am the laziest son of a gun, that I showed up to this church that I'm the pastor of and I don't do anything except preach. Of course, preaching is a very intense thing to do if you've ever done it before. It's kind of the
thing, but yeah.
But you know what? First of all, it's the right thing to do because it's what the Bible tells me my job is. But secondly, what's wrong with showing up to church and seeing everybody has a job that is small enough that they can do it with joy and not be worried about it and be juggling a million things? You're not more spiritual that way. Now, some people have the temptation to be lazy. I found that that's not my temptation. My temptation is to overdo it. When you talk about the overstimulation of the stress hormone, I'll tell you what, man, when I'm not doing something like this, you didn't watch SpongeBob growing up. You were homeschooled, but
I've caught up since.
there's an episode where he goes out jellyfishing with the famous jellyfisher guy, and they tie him up and they say, we're going to use you as bait for the jellyfish, and they give him they call it a jellyfish call, and when he blows in it, it goes, loser, loser. It's stupid, right? I just have to explain it for all those that are not of my generation in this audience. But when I'm not full throttle trying to get stuff done, that's what I hear in my head. Loser, loser, loser. And I'll even be like, I've got to find something to do. Well, this is a season where when I hit my 6-month review, because that tells you how stressed I am at that, I have a 6-month review for myself.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're my favorite days of the year.
Did you get a good grade, though?
I did not get a good grade, but I adjusted the system.
There we go.
And the system has been working really well for me, and I've lost 11 pounds in 6 weeks, so there you go.
Nice.
But
so looking forward to next 6-month review. We'll be in good shape.
Yes. But yeah, I usually do them around my fire pit in the backyard.
Oh, there you go.
So it's just this time there were so many flies outside, I couldn't do it. But anyway, like what I'm trying to do with my wife and with you and the ministry is to say, it's time to throttle down and enjoy this season that is coming up, not be so stressed out. And the reason I want to talk about this is because maybe this is something that you need as you're listening to this, whoever you are in whatever situation you're in, or maybe just overall, maybe your life there's just too much going on and you need to do fewer things, or maybe you can't enjoy the seasons of rest that God gives you because you're not taking advantage of them. Think of this. God gave the children of Israel a rest day every week. He gave them a rest year. Did you ever stop and think about that, Zach? They got a rest year every 7 years.
Yeah.
And every 50 years, they got a extra rest year where every debt was forgiven.
Debt cancellation.
Everything went back to zero. You had parties all year long. They were supposed to save up so that they could feast and celebrate all year long.
I'm just really concerned about the productivity of that economy, though. I just don't think that it's, the number is not going to go up.
And do you know what the Lord told them with that?
He said,
shut up,
it doesn't matter.
Said, the exact thing that you said, the Lord told them, he says, you are not to lay up extra food for yourselves because I'm going to provide for you.
Right.
He says, you need to trust that I'm going to make your harvests large enough to allow you to rest for a year. And this was the one thing that they did not do in the new covenant.
Because they got worried.
And this is why they were judged. This is why they were sent into exile. So God values rest and relaxation. Read Ecclesiastes again, guys, and recognize how much of it is about stop chasing the bag and enjoy your life. That's what Ecclesiastes is about. It says you spend all your time chasing knowledge, chasing fun, chasing money. It's not even, it is making a moral judgment, but more than that, it's saying, guys, you're going to waste your life. He says, I sought good in all these things, and the only thing good that I found was to enjoy my food and drink with my wife and my children. That's what he says. So, Zach, I want to do this. I'll go ahead and go first because I didn't prep you for this, but I want to talk about some things that we are doing. I really wanted to talk about this subject, and then we'll conclude Matthew 6. But some things that we're doing practically in order to obey that thing that we're doing. Like we said, we're doing something different. We're down throttling a little bit. And what does that look like for you and for me? I'll start, and this can be work and personal life, but starting with work, as I said, I am limiting my administrative tasks every single day. The things that take up my time and will cause my day to feel frantic is when I want to take a look at all the administrative tasks that have to be done: phone calls, planning, making up action points, sending emails, making schedules. All those things will take up all of my time every day if I let them. They are the ultimate thing that fills the container in which you put them in.
They're never going to be finished. You're never going to get to a time where it's like, it's all done now. That'll never happen.
Well, guess what? A few years ago, I implemented, I forget who got it first. I think it was 4-hour work week, but where they say, you should only answer email once a day. I started doing that.
Oh, that's a great rule.
And you know what? I answer my email first thing in the morning, and I don't touch it after that.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have not had any problems. No. I have not once had anybody, call me. If it's that severe, they'll call me.
Right.
And there's some people that say, you don't text back right away. Yeah, you're darn tootin' I don't text back right away. I do that on purpose. And if I don't know what I'm going to say, then sometimes I just don't answer. But, that's one. So I did that. But what I'm doing now is I am limiting myself. Every day on my to-do list, I can do 2 administrative tasks. You may clear your inbox, and you may do 2 things. If one of them is a staff meeting, then you get 1 more. If one of them is a phone call, then you get 1 more. And once you do those 2, you're done. Now, there will be days where you have to do more than that. But what it is teaching me is you need to prioritize the things that need to be done and don't do a bunch of busy work. And also, you need to plan it ahead of time. And I've also been trying to implement the rule that you have 1 meeting per week. Like 1 meeting, not like, we have our staff review every Tuesday, but I don't need to be meeting with 10 people every week because I get meeting requests all the time. And you know what? Most of the time, it's not a big deal to say, no, I can't do this week. How's 2 weeks from now? Almost every time, it's fine. Or if something is urgent, I call person B and I say, hey, can we reschedule this for next Monday? Most of the time, it's just fine because that is a constant frantic thing. And I've learned it's not that big of a change, and it's a huge load off my mind. So what do you think of that, Zach? And then what's something that you might be doing too?
Yeah, I think that I used to be of the young man's persuasion that all of the old people that were saying that your phone and all your notifications are driving you crazy were just old, silly people. And I would love to still think that. And
Isn't it funny how that has reversed?
Yes, it has reversed.
All the young people are the ones that don't spend so much time on their phones,
and
the old folks are the ones that
wire-headed. Yeah,
reading articles about how millennials are always on their phones.
Yep. And I'll tell you,
guys.
Dude, I got a. It just makes me sick to think about. I got a hardware card. It's called Bloom. They've got ones that are called Brick, different things like that. That just turns off a bunch of apps on my phone. And it's on almost all day now, and it makes me sick how much more happy and productive I am.
You don't miss it, do you?
Oh my God, forget missing it. Like you just forget that you lose the habit. After like 2 weeks, you're like, oh, what the heck was I doing with my time?
And you learned that it was habit.
Oh,
you
100%.
Weren't doing it because you wanted to.
Habit.
You were doing it because you felt compelled to.
And so that has been incredibly helpful. It just makes, and you know what? I give myself a little window. You know what? When in the morning, if I want to wake up and I can check the certain things or check those apps or whatever, that's fine. But then after that, we turn it on and away we go. And it like you said, it gives you a window. It slows down the pace at which I'm getting new information on board, so I can think about things more. I can make decisions better. Right. So that's huge. I also like what you said about like just spacing out things that This is maybe good advice for anybody. If you have a certain type of work that you do that's like the hardest for you to get done or the most draining, like don't stack that all up in one big heck day where you're like, this is the day of doing the thing I hate. First of all, you're not going to do it. You're going to procrastinate on it because you're dreading it. Second of all,
and you're going to make you hate it more, which is going to make you push it off more.
Exactly. And instead, know yourself. Know how the Lord has made you. I'm really good at this, but this is not my favorite. Okay, well then space that out so that you don't overload yourself. There's nothing more brave about that. So yeah, I think all those are super helpful. Similar to what you've done, it's interesting. We haven't even talked about this, I don't think, until the podcast. I have started implementing like a first part of the day, last part of the day system where, look, all the normal stuff I got to do every day, it's going to get done in the middle. I know I've got to get it done. But if I do not start my work day, I have just decided, I've tried it all the other ways. If I do not start my work day with a focused period of reading the Bible, like I'm going to sit down and I'm going to take notes at 9, That is the thing I'm trying to do now, because I know if I wake up and the kids are going and the family's trying to do stuff and we're trying to get out the door, that's a difficult time for me to schedule reading the Word. And if I say I'm going to do it at home at night, good luck. That's not how that works. I don't do that. If I work at a church as an assistant pastor, this is a part of my work day. And by giving myself permission to do that, number one, it happens. And number two, it turns out sitting down and having that focused time gets my day started in a better way than starting
absolutely.
my day by getting blasted with all the things I forgot from yesterday. And then I read on the way out of my day at about 4:30, whenever, okay, everything useful that's going to be done today is done. I will go get a different book, something that's useful for, I'm not just like, fooling around. It's something that's useful for the church. Either it's a book about ministry or a biblical backgrounds book or something I'm trying to learn on, and I'll sit down and read that. So that as I'm headed home, the last thing I did wasn't checking my email and realizing I have 7 more things to start doing tomorrow. It was like, nope, I've got, and it forces me to remind myself, you have the time to do these things.
Right.
This is also a part of the work. You're not so busy and stressed. You're not so important. No, corporate's not calling me talking about the Johnson file. It's okay.
Yeah.
I can do these things.
And those days will come. Like you will have those days where, we will have our weeks where we got to put in 60 hours here.
And have.
And you know what? That's fine. Yep. But we've entered a season now where it's like, look, if this can be a week where we can stand to do 37, 38, why not? Like, why not just do that? I know that kind of sounds anathema to some of us, and I think that very rarely happens around here, but it's just our way of saying there's no reason for us to put in a bunch of busy work in order to feel productive when we're getting everything done. The days will come when they're going to be busy, so why not own those? And I'll just say in my personal life, I've been doing things like I don't do work at home if I can help it, and that's been a very difficult habit to break, I'll tell you what, because I'll just go home from work, pull out my computer and keep working
because it's fun. We like this,
but we don't.
Well, true. Because
then
certain parts,
then that's when you go, I haven't wet a hook in 4 months, and I haven't, watched that TV show that I like, and so what I've been doing is just I don't do that. And if I can push it to tomorrow, I push it to tomorrow. If I forget something that's got to be done, it's got to be done. The buck stops with me. It's got to happen. But I've also been telling myself it's time for me to start getting out into the city and being more social with people, because for the last 7 years, I have come home, and that has been my life. I've been at home and I've been at church, and that has been it. And it's not good for me. I am you might not know this, and this is the problem. If you only know me down here, you might not realize I'm a rather social, outgoing person. I like being around people and doing things. But if all I'm doing is church, and y'all, when I come to church, I love church, but it is still work for me in there's always going to be a sense where it is still kind of like me coming to work. And then when I go home, well, it's home, and I want to be home when I do that. But I'm telling myself now it's time for me to get out and start, doing the things that I like to do, but go out and do them with other people.
Yep.
I've even been saying, go home and, when you're at the house, don't try to think of the next productive thing that you can do. You got yard work to do that on the weekends. And, I'm trying to get myself to do 1 or 2 yard tasks a week. But when you come home on a Tuesday and, you get home and it's, 6:30 and the kids are going to be going to bed in 2 hours, hang out with the kids, watch Mary Poppins, make some popcorn and hang out. You're not losing something. You're going to love this memory for the rest of your life. So this is just something practical that I've been doing and we've been talking about to not be chasing down these other things like it's up to us. And, I'll just throw one more thing out there. It's been on my mind lately. You hear so much, like anytime type of productivity advice, the one thing that always comes up for men especially, the thing that's killing your productivity is video games. Stop playing video games. It's ruining your life. And what I have
it on good authority that you would be a millionaire if you hadn't played all those video games.
I'm so
Tyler.
tired of this.
I really think. Do you know that honestly, all of us would have our own businesses that would be successful already if only we had not. If Mario has literally stolen trillions of dollars of our potential wealth.
That's the problem right there. Is everybody hears video games and they think Mario. But look, here's what the problem is there's an assumption embedded in that if you're taking leisure time, you could be doing something productive with that time. You could be whittling a chair. You could be in the backyard, cutting the grass with scissors. But, these same people, especially if you're online, they'll say, why don't you spend your time instead going on a boat in the ocean? It's like, I don't have a boat. I don't have, well, yeah, because you spend all that time playing video games. To which I say, look, I'm a gamer. That is my thing. That is my nerd niche where I fit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but I do this a lot. And I say this to people when they ask about it. Well, how much time do you spend watching television or watching movies or football or golf or whatever it is? How much time do you spend cross-stitching, ladies, or making model trains, fellas? I don't fault you for any of that. But the thing is, it's your leisure time, and this is mine.
Right.
You know, this is when I come home from the end of the day, I've worked hard at it's not a business I started, but a church that I planted that is going well. The kids are handled and clean, and everybody is safe and taken care of, and the bills are paid, and the yard is mowed, and I've done everything I need to. And it's 9 o'clock. I'm sorry. I'm pulling up the PlayStation. I'm going to play Hunt Showdown. I'm going to do that. Deep cut for some of y'all. Don't even know what that is. Yeah. But you know what? That's something that I'm allowing myself to do as well, because I have this bad habit of prohibiting myself from doing the things that I enjoy because, well, you could be on that grind set and getting, making passive income selling, stupid things on Amazon. It's just silly.
The only thing people that tell you that are doing is trying to make money off of you. By the way,
yes.
So it's not like they're. Yeah, it is kind of funny. I know
it's just a silly little rant I wanted to go on, but it speaks to this larger thing of that you're constantly afraid that, but I could be doing more.
Ecclesiastes says that it's like, what are you doing, dude? Like, you're not getting sleep, and yes. I kind of tell people that say that, I'm like, look, I defy you to earn money at the time of day when I play video games because
That's so great. Because I love that.
Because look, man,
I'm stealing that, bro,
right,
for sure.
I have a family. I have a family that I love, that I take care of, and I want to spend time with them because I've been out working. Look, man, when I play video games, it's 11 at night. I'm the only one awake. Like, yes. What are you doing that's making money?
Dude,
Tell me.
I defy you to make money during the time when I play video games.
Tell me what you do at 1 a.m.
All the people that tell you that make their money by selling you $10,000 course on how to make money that they cribbed from all your favorite,
and they're sleeping at 1
audiobooks.
So it just makes me laugh.
What I'm trying to say with all this, guys, is that may not be your thing. I'm not saying you need to, although, I mean, have you seen video games lately?
Pretty fun.
If you like to watch TV and you think that that's less productive than playing video, at least I'm participating in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So it's not a real accomplishment. Okay, well then you give this a try and let's see how you beat the true ending of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice.
That's right.
And you tell me. But whatever your thing is, guys, if you like to golf, go golfing sometimes. That seems to be part of golf culture, is that you have to also hate it. Have you noticed that?
I think they're very, or at least they don't want me to like it. That's what I'm picking up.
Or if you like pickleball, go play pickleball. Ladies, my wife's going to a book club tonight. Yeah, there's book clubs for men, but it's usually a bunch of gay men is usually what those book clubs are. I'm just going to tell it like it is. If that's what you like to do, go do that. If you like to, go outside and you like to work in the yard, that's what my father-in-law loves to do. That's what he likes to do. Is he has a degree in horticulture and he loves to make his yard what it is. Some of us make our yards look nice, and if it's good enough, we go inside for the day. Some people, they want to be outside. If you like to garden, if you like to paint, if you like to draw, if you like to play guitar or Guitar Hero, you need to have these things in your life, because if you're not doing them because I could be doing more, what you're going to end up doing is pacing around the house, stressing about it, and not actually doing anything productive, when your family will love you better if you can take a breath every once in a while and trust that the Lord is going to provide for you in the work that you've already done.
The secret assumption and all this that we've been talking about comes back to what Jesus is talking about. It's the secret assumption of worry is it's all down to me. If I don't get more productive at 11 at night rather than do anything else, then something bad will happen. As if you really do. When you really drill down on that, what you're saying is, it's that assumption of that silly poem. What's the poem? I am the master of my Invictus. Yeah. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. But that's not biblical. The Bible says, Jesus is saying, hey guys, I'm doing all that.
The Bible says Jesus take the wheel.
Right. I'm doing all that. It's like when your kid is learning to ride a bike and you're the one who's keeping it upright, keeping it going forward, and looking out for cars. It's like, hey guys, and they're worried. Like, what will happen if I stop pedaling? Nothing. I got it. Like, I'm doing all this anyway. What will happen if you stop pedaling? Well, you'll have a nice time. Maybe it's okay. Yeah. I've got it. Right. And that's why he's telling us to not worry, not because he doesn't know what it's like to be us, but because he does know what it's like to be us.
Absolutely. And the next verse is a famous one, Matthew 6:33. He says, "But seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." And it's simple enough. Why can we not worry? Because if we make the things of God our top priority, God is going to see to it that everything else is taken care of. This is so important, but most of us aren't willing to do that. You know, the worries of, am I going to be provided for? Are we going to have all of our needs? Or maybe more likely, how am I going to climb the ladder? This is a very male thing, male in his 30s. Like, how am I going to, I'll tell you, just be straight up honest with you. I'll look out and say, I want to take my family on vacations to Cabo. I want to live in a house like that. I want to have, my kids be able to go to great colleges and, have that thing that the Lord didn't give me, but I want to be able to give to them if it's available. And I want my wife to have nice things, and I want to dress sharp too. Like, I want all of that. But it's okay to desire those things, but if you spend all your time stressing and worrying about it, then guess what? Even if you get it, you won't be able to enjoy it.
Oh,
you
of course
seek
not.
first the kingdom of God, and he will provide it for us. That's the true test of faith. Are you going to put Jesus first and exclude everything else? Because if you can put Jesus first, he will so align your priorities and so bless your life that you'll be able just to sit back and say, I'm not worried. I'm not worried about this because God is going to take care of it. And we've been learning some great songs about that lately, Zach. That one song, Everything I Need, My Father Has It, was just so good on that one. And the song we sang last night about, You've got plans for me. I think most of us would really, really like to do this. I think I describe it this way sometimes. I feel like sometimes there's a door in your heart, and on the other side, like I want to open it so much. I wish I could just go all in for Jesus and believe that. And what I want you to do is reach out and open that door and let the Lord in and put him first. You will not believe how everything falls together. I mean, he's never let us down yet.
Right.
The Lord doesn't promise that he's going to take things away. This is the thing. Well, if I give everything to Jesus, I'm gonna miss out. But what does he say? All these things will not be taken away from you. They'll be added to you.
Right.
The Lord has promised that he will add to your lives, not take away. And you need to have enough faith to trust that if I put Jesus first, he's going to provide all the things that I need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an important second clause. He's not saying, seek first the kingdom in his righteousness, and then you won't even want all those things anymore. You won't even want that silly food and those silly clothes.
Albie wasn't racist anymore.
Right.
Sorry, you did the voice just like that.
Yeah, I did, accidentally. It's crazy because sometimes people take the wrong conclusions from this. Oh, well, if I want those things, If I sometimes look at things and say, hey, I would like to do a little better here, I'd like to push a little further, that I must not be loving Jesus or his kingdom. No, Jesus said, look, I want those things for you too.
Yes.
I want this stuff for you. I want to bless you. I want to give you the things that I want. Golly, in the Bible, it doesn't say, hey, in my Father's house are many hovels. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's not what it says. It says in my Father's house are many mansions. I love to bless you with things, but I know how to do it right. You've got to do it this way. Here's the way you do it. You look at me, you pay attention to me, you put me first, and I got it. I'm going to take care of those things. And you're going to work. Well, that means that we don't work hard. No, you're going to work hard. You're doing all that stuff already. Golly. Like, you're already doing all that stuff if you love Jesus. You're not working hard. You're not being lazy. It's just, I think, a change in concern of, am I concerned about me? Am I looking to me to provide all these things, or am I looking to Jesus? And then it says, like you said, it doesn't say, and then I'll remove that dirty need for stuff, or I'll remove that dirty need for feeling okay and for having a life. No,
the Lord loves to prosper his people, guys. He does. Zach, read us verse 34 and bring us to the end.
Last one says, therefore worry not for the morrow will worry for itself. Sufficient to the day is its own trouble.
We've kind of talked about this today, but that kind of sums it all up. We have such a terrible tendency to focus too much on the future. Just what's going to happen tomorrow, what's going to happen next. And, it's like my favorite pastime to set goals and make lists and dream dreams. But you know what? If you get into that too long and you're constantly looking to the future, then once you accomplish something, you can't even enjoy it because you haven't learned how to sit down and enjoy what's right in front of you. It's kind of like the person that has been dating for so long and finding new girlfriends and going from one to the next, try to find the right one. When they get married, sometimes they have a very hard time settling into the fact that you're not going to ever do that again. You're not to flirt and chase girls ever again because you now are married and you're supposed to settle in with this. Well, it can be like that in life too, that if you're so looking for the next thing that when you finally get it, you're no longer worried about it. You're focused on the next thing. So, you got the nice house, but now you don't care because now all you can think about is getting a nicer car. And once you get the nicer car, you're not worried about that because now I'm trying to get a boat. And so you constantly push yourself forward. But Jesus says, don't worry about that because you'll have plenty of time to worry about that tomorrow. I love Jesus. It's kind of a sense of humor here. And you feel like you're giving up your now for then. And in one sense you are, in that you're laying up for tomorrow, but you need to make sure that you enjoy the day today that God gives you and take the time to breathe and enjoy what he brings in, because this day isn't going to last very long. And as I talked about on the Difference Makers podcast not long ago, you're going to be nostalgic for these days, believe it or not. You're going to be nostalgic for right now. So you might as well, as you progress towards the next thing, enjoy it as much as you can. You maybe loved high school, but high school was what? Always a push towards graduation and what came next. But because you were able to also be in it and enjoy it, it was both and that's why it's such a bittersweet thing in the best possible way. I'm going to miss this season of my life, but I'm excited for the next one because I've been working for it for the last 4 years without obsessing over it. And that's going to be what your life is. So, Zach, anything else to add to this about not worrying about tomorrow, but just focusing on the day that the Lord gives us?
Everything that you see. It's so funny how this is such a cultural thing that everybody pretends that Jesus didn't say first. Like Yoda stole this from Jesus, right? Never his mind on where he was, what he was doing, right?
That's another great example of you stole that from somebody.
Yeah, of course. And Jesus has been on this, guys. Jesus has been saying, hey, you're obsessed with the future and the past sometimes, right? You're obsessed with both these things. But what about right now? What am I telling you to do right now? And if you've already done that, then what are you worried about? And a lot of times I think sometimes with worry, we're, like I said, we find things to worry about when I don't know that the Lord is wanting us to feel like that. I don't think the Lord is wanting us to find new things that, I don't know, maybe I did this wrong today. What if maybe this whole part of my life is a mess? The Holy Spirit reveals that stuff to us, and we don't need to go tearing up all the carpets in our life all the time to find the thing that we're doing horribly wrong.
Right.
The Holy Spirit's really good at letting you know, right? So I think
that we need to get a place where we can rest in
exactly.
the Lord and be happy with where we are and what God has done.
Yeah. And the Lord, the Lord died to afford you that ability, right? He specifically died and rose again so you could have all these benefits. And sometimes we hold them off because we feel like, it would be more spiritual to feel bad. It's like, no, I don't think so. Jesus is saying, don't worry about tomorrow. The sufficient for the day is its own trouble. When you get to the end of the day, that's all the troubles we're going to have today, right? We're not going to borrow tomorrow's troubles.
Don't borrow tomorrow's trouble. That rhymes kind of.
Yeah.
I feel like I've got a book cooking here with a lot of these things I've been thinking about lately. Just a lot of these ideas of just enjoying the life that you have right in front of you and not stressing about it too much. So I don't know. That's kind of how I think. I always think there's another book. See me worrying about tomorrow? See what I do?
Add it to the list of books.
Add it to the list of books. Well, guys, thank you for listening to the Ironworks podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this, completing our series of at least part 2 of our series on the Sermon on the Mount, which was chapter 6. We're going to be moving into some other series after this one, and not quite sure what those are yet, but I'm sure they're going to be great. You can go to ironworks.media if you're excited about the ministry. We'd love for you to join our mailing list to get 2 free ebooks today and be kept up to date on everything that's going on. The next thing will probably be the release of the audiobook for the Desolation of Israel, which is available now. And we got another book coming up at the end of this year, so you want to make sure that you're available for that. We're trying to build a premier resource network for the Christian church, and your support helps us with that. So please engage with this podcast, however the service you're using would have you do that, whether that's a like or that's a share. People ask how they can help with our online ministry. Friends, it literally is to like, comment, and subscribe. So please help us out with that. We love you all so much. Thanks for listening to the Ironworks podcast.
Thanks, guys.